Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone.
A Minnesota man's quick and decisive actions are being applauded by many this week after he single-handedly saved his children from a would-be carjacker. According to reports, it all started around 8:30 p.m. on November 30th when Derek Gochi and his wife Dina were dropping off some items at a friend's place in the 800 block of Russell Avenue North in Minneapolis' Willard Hay neighborhood. As Dina was taking the items to the house, Derek stayed behind in the family's SUV with their 4 young children, all of whom are under the age of 5. However, things took a terrifying turn when Derek stepped out of the vehicle to close up one of the back doors. In just the few brief seconds that it took for him to do this, an unknown man ran up, hopped into the driver's seat, and sped off. All 4 children were still inside. Though completely stunned by what had just happened, Derek immediately sprung into action. After realizing that the suspect had left behind a van in the middle of the street that was still running, he jumped behind the wheel and started following behind his own vehicle. Derek followed his SUV for roughly half a mile north until he reached the intersection of Penn and Plymouth Avenues. It was here, as the suspect turned a little bit to get past a parked vehicle, that Derek intentionally rear-ended the SUV at a low speed, pinning it and forcing the unknown man to come to a stop. Evidently realizing that there was nowhere to go, the suspect jumped out of the SUV. He apparently shouted sorry to Derek before running off. While the Gochi family's SUV sustained minor damage as a result of the incident, thankfully his kids were safe and uninjured. According to Dina, she only found out about what had happened after the fact, when police informed her that her husband had performed the rescue. At the time of this recording, authorities say that they're still searching for the suspect. It turned out that the van that he had abandoned before the carjacking was also stolen, though police say that they were able to lift his fingerprints from the Gochi family's SUV. Once arrested, authorities say the suspect is not only looking at carjacking charges, but possible kidnapping charges as well.
Authorities in Monmouth, New Jersey say that a trio of alleged criminals got quite the surprise this week when instead of getting away with a car, they got served an instant dose of karma. According to reports, it all started at around 9 a.m. on November 30th when a woman from Manalapan Township was sitting in her 2015 Mazda 3 in the parking lot of a Walgreens in Englishtown. All of a sudden, she was approached by 3 strangers who caught her by surprise and managed to open her driver's side door. When they did, they forced her out before taking off in her vehicle. Though the carjackers managed to escape the parking lot and started to head eastbound down Gordon's Corner Road towards Route 9, it wasn't long before they realized that the vehicle was handling a bit strangely. That's because the car they had just stolen had a flat tire. It turned out that shortly before the crime had taken place, the Mazda's owner had noticed the flat tire too. In fact, she had called AAA and had been waiting for assistance to switch the tire out until she was carjacked. After realizing what the issue was themselves and making it just half a mile from the crime scene, the trio of suspects reportedly gave up on the stolen Mazda and pulled into the parking lot of a local synagogue. However, by that time, it was too late. The victim had called 911 immediately after the crime, and police were quickly able to track down the suspects. They have since been identified as 20-year-old Ray J. Durant, 18-year-old Tyler Lairs, and 19-year-old Hasma Williams, all of whom are reportedly from Brooklyn. Each one of the suspects has been charged with carjacking, motor vehicle theft, theft of property, and conspiracy to commit a crime. Williams is also facing an additional charge of hindering apprehension. Adding a further layer of apparent karma to the case, authorities say that the suspects are now being investigated for additional crimes that allegedly took place in the area before they were caught. Thankfully, the victim in the case was not injured as a result of the crime.
Authorities in the city of Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, say that a man has been left with a disfiguring facial injury this week after an argument over a game led to a violent altercation between him and another man. According to reports, the incident began at around 9:30 p.m. on November 28th when police were called to the Hollywood Casino and Resort Gulf Coast with a report of an assault. They arrived to find the victim in the casino's parking lot suffering from an injury to his face. More specifically, a good chunk of his nose was missing. Witnesses said that 51-year-old Mark Curtis Wells was responsible for the gruesome injury, but that he had fled the scene in his vehicle. After some investigation, police learned that earlier that day, Wells had gotten into an argument over a game of golf that had taken place at the resort's Bridges golf course. The specifics of that argument are unclear, but according to reports, it continued for most of the day and involved several people, culminating with a fight in the casino parking lot. It was at that point that Wells attacked the victim, biting off a portion of his nose. 2 days later, Wells reportedly turned himself into police. He has now been charged with felony mayhem and was later released from custody on a $50,000 bond. If convicted, Wells could apparently face up to 7 years in prison.
Authorities in Chattanooga, Tennessee have released a tragic update in the case of a missing 22-year-old university student this week, announcing that they had recovered her remains and that her boyfriend has now been arrested and charged with her murder. According to reports, 22-year-old Jasmine Pace was last seen on November 22nd. When she failed to show up for Thanksgiving, her family became concerned. It wasn't long before they discovered other red flags as well. Jasmine's social media activity didn't follow her usual patterns and settings, and in a Facebook post, an image was used that was several years old. Her parents say that they received a text message from her that week that explained that she was going to visit a friend in South Carolina. However, when they reached out to the person in question, she told them no such plans existed. In fact, she had moved to Kentucky. Using a pin drop that Jasmine had sent to her mother just after 2:15 a.m. on November 23rd, her parents were able to travel to her last known location. It was an apartment building in Chattanooga's North Shore neighborhood, the same one where her boyfriend, 22-year-old Jason Chen, lived. According to Jasmine's mother, though there was no sign of her daughter or Chen anywhere at his apartment complex, she was able to find her daughter's driver's license and some of her credit cards. Disturbingly, neighbors say that they remembered hearing a commotion around the same time that Jasmine had sent the message with her location. With that, her parents officially reported her missing. When police conducted a search of Chen's apartment, there were multiple signs that a violent incident had occurred there. Traces of blood that had been cleaned up were found in multiple rooms, along with broken glass. Upon further investigation, authorities were able to find evidence that proved Chen had purchased cleaning supplies that had been used to try and get rid of the blood. Using surveillance footage and the My Chevy app from Jasmine's 2021 Chevy Equinox, police were able to track her vehicle about 130 miles northwest to the town of Nolensville. More specifically, to the home of one of Chen's family members. Chen was there at the time and allegedly had noticeable cuts on his hands. Sadly, on December 1st, police announced that their search for Jasmine had come to a tragic end. Her remains were found somewhere along the 1000 block of Suck Creek Road, about 2 miles north of Chen's apartment. While authorities have not provided any additional information about how Jasmine was killed, they say that Chen was arrested for the crime this week. He has been charged with first-degree murder.
Representatives from Florida's Osceola County Sheriff's Office say that they were left completely dumbfounded this week after a man brazenly tried to steal from a store that was packed with police officers. According to reports, the incident took place sometime recently at a Walmart location in the city of St. Cloud while the store was in the middle of holding its annual Shop with a Cop event. The event is a collaboration between the company and the Osceola County Sheriff's Office, where police officers do community outreach by shopping in the store with children for the holidays. As you might imagine, given how busy Walmart is, it's not just 1 or 2 officers that take part in the annual event. According to the Sheriff's Office, nearly 40 of their officers were present on this particular evening, not to mention others from the forensics team, community services team, and other parts of the department. However, apparently none of this was enough to deter one foolhardy alleged thief. As the Sheriff's Office explained in a recent Facebook post, a man, referred to only by the name Brad, was caught trying to steal from the store as the place was packed with their officers. He was promptly arrested and was apparently carrying a variety of items, including perfume, gloves, hedge clippers, a syringe, and a plastic baggie containing, quote, unknown contents. While we have a feeling that the unknown contents Brad was carrying might explain a fair bit about his alleged actions, in either case, we agree with the sheriff's department, who summed up the situation in just 3 short words, quote, "Bad idea, Brad."
If you're like us, then you probably agree that being a wanted fugitive is nothing to be proud of. Even if you don't share this opinion for whatever reason, though, it seems fairly obvious just from a purely strategic standpoint that drawing attention to the fact that you're a wanted fugitive is a bad idea, especially if your goal is to, stay a wanted fugitive. Of course, like any rule, there's always the exception. Case in point, the subject of our next segment, 40-year-old Christopher Spaulding. It all started on November 28th, when representatives from Georgia's Rockdale County Sheriff's Office put out their top 10 most wanted list for the month of November. As the name suggests, the list consists of the 10 most notorious suspects that authorities in the county are currently searching for, and rotates out as new suspects emerge and old ones are arrested. While it's not a list that most normal people would understandably take much pride in making, that was not the case with Christopher Spaulding. Apparently, when he saw the list, he wanted to know why he hadn't made the cut. Naturally, he took his complaint right to the source, commenting on the post with his personal Facebook account and asking, quote, "How about me?" Not wanting to be rude, police addressed Spaulding's concern, replying, quote, "You are correct. You have 2 warrants. We are on the way." Staying true to their word, officers soon took Spaulding into custody on 2 counts of felony violation of probation. In an update on Facebook, they also thanked the fugitive for assisting in his own capture. All jokes aside, though, police took the time to reiterate that just because a suspect isn't on their top 10 most wanted list, it doesn't mean that they aren't looking for them. According to the sheriff's office, their most wanted list is simply based off of the severity of a fugitive's charges.
Authorities in Plymouth County, Massachusetts say that a multi-day manhunt for a double murder suspect has finally come to an end this week after the man was arrested for a second violent incident in Florida. According to reports, the situation began at around 9:20 p.m. on November 29th when police were asked to do a welfare check at the home of an elderly couple in the town of Marshfield. When they arrived, they encountered a grisly scene. 70-year-old Carl and Vicky Matson were found dead inside along with their dog. Police say that the couple were stabbed and beaten to death. The dog's injuries are still being investigated. After analyzing the crime scene and speaking with witnesses, authorities were quickly able to identify a suspect, 27-year-old Christopher Keeley. The following day, Massachusetts State Police issued a be-on-the-lookout alert for the 27-year-old, announcing that he was a suspect in a double murder. They also released images of a 2019 black Jeep Wrangler that Keeley had been last seen driving along with the vehicle's license plate information. The Jeep was quickly found in a parking lot about 25 miles west of the crime scene, though by this time there was no sign of Keeley anywhere. The 27-year-old was finally arrested at around 8:20 p.m. on December 2nd, all the way down in Miami Beach, Florida. He was taken into custody after allegedly attacking another person with a hammer. While the motive behind the brutal double murder of the Matsons currently remains a mystery, authorities believe that the killings were targeted. According to the couple's neighbors, Keeley was a friend of their son's and had been living at their residence for several months prior to the crime. At the time of this recording, the situation is still developing.
Authorities in Riverside, California say that they are investigating the horrific aftermath of a truly chilling crime this week after a former Virginia police officer allegedly kidnapped a teenager that he had been communicating with online and murdered 3 of her family members. According to reports, the situation began just after 11 a.m. on November 25th when Riverside police received a call for a welfare check on a 15-year-old girl. The girl had been seen looking distressed while getting into a red Kia Soul along the 11,200 block of Price Court and was accompanied by an older man. No sooner had officers started driving towards the scene than they received a second call. This one was about a house fire, but was coming from the exact same street. When officers arrived at the burning home, they rushed inside and found 3 adults lying in the front entryway. Though they immediately pulled them outside in an attempt to save them from the flames, it was already too late. The officers soon realized that the 3 victims had been dead before the fire even started. They were subsequently identified as 3 members of the same family, 38-year-old Brooke Winneck and her parents, 69-year-old Mark and 65-year-old Sherry. As investigators started to put the pieces of what had happened together, they came to a chilling realization. The 15-year-old girl who was the original subject of the welfare call was also a member of this family. She was the daughter of Brooke Winneck. Upon further analysis, police learned who the man was that the teenager had been seen with. A 28-year-old man who had formerly worked for the Virginia State Police named Austin Lee Edwards. Authorities issued alerts for Edwards in his vehicle, and the search continued for several hours until the 28-year-old was spotted driving in Kelso, an unincorporated area of San Bernardino County. When police caught up to Edwards, he fired several shots at them, causing them to return fire. The 28-year-old was hit during the shootout and was pronounced dead at the scene. The 15-year-old victim was rescued by police, physically unharmed. While the investigation into the entire terrifying incident is still very much underway, this is what police say they know so far. According to them, Edwards had been communicating with the teenage victim online for some time prior to last week's events, and had allegedly posed as a 17-year-old boy. On November 25th, he reportedly drove more than 2,500 miles from his home in Virginia and went to meet the teen at her home. When he did, he parked on a neighbor's driveway before walking over to the house. Once inside, he allegedly killed the teenager's mother and grandparents and set the home on fire before forcing her outside and into his vehicle. While it's unclear what Edwards had planned to do following the terrifying kidnapping, further chilling details have emerged in the past few days. According to his neighbors, he recently purchased a home in the small town of Saltville, Virginia. The previous owner of the property claims that he had asked almost no questions before buying it, and neighbors say that he blacked out all of the windows shortly after moving in on November 14th. At the current time, the surviving teenage victim of the attack is reportedly in the custody of Child Protective Services and is receiving trauma counseling. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a minute to thank our amazing supporters over on Patreon. As many of you are aware, our situation on YouTube always seems to be a bit uncertain, but our patrons help to ensure that we can continue to make content like this long term without having to worry as much about what surprises might be thrown our way. Plus, patrons also get access to 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. If you'd like to help support the channel directly, head over to patreon.com/crimezone to join. You can also find that link in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and take care.